Welcome, I'm Michael Ketterer, I'm president of the Falmouth Chamber, and welcome to this latest session of our Business Education Series, which is very generous and supported by Cape Cod Healthcare and Coastal Community Capital. And Marcia Godet is here from Coastal Community Capital, and she'll talk a little bit about Coastal Community Capital, what they do for small businesses, small business lending, etc. She's here to answer any questions. And, I can see her after. You're going to say a few words after.
Sure.
Great. What we've tried to do this year is bring topics out of the ordinary to the business community. This one in particular, I think it's an important one. And I'd like to really thank Representative David Vieira for bringing this to our attention, and Gabbe Rowland for helping to coordinate this. And today's session is dealing with the workplace employment leave for victims of abuse in the workplace. And Gabby's going to talk a little bit about how she was able to leave her workplace with the help, I believe, of Ketterer, who's going to also speak. Greg's the owner of the Show Acres. And also Michael Lewis, who's here from Seafood Sam's. And in particular, David's going to start off, and he's going to talk a little bit about the law and how it really applies to businesses with 50 or more employees, leaving kind of a hole for those businesses that have 50 or less employees, which really is the bulk of the businesses that are members of the Falmouth Chamber. So this is an important topic for us to get involved in as well. And I think today, through Gabby's experience, the support of Greg, insight from Mike as well, can better explain what smaller businesses can do to help their employees deal with these pressures. So, without further ado, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, David.
So, I wanted to talk a little bit about how we got here today. And we got here today because a little over a year ago, Gabby had a Break the Silence event in Falmouth at the Universalist Church, and I attended. We were in the middle of a debate in the legislature of a comprehensive domestic violence reform act. And there were a lot of moving parts to that. And one of the pieces of that legislation was applying standards of leave to victims of domestic violence so that they could go to court, they could go to counseling, they could do the things they needed to do to get their lives back on track. And the trigger in that law, as they are in many laws, are if you employ 50 individuals full-time or more. How many do you employ 50 or more? Okay. So for one of you, your business, this law applies, and we do have in the packet handouts there the advisory. I don't know if you see it yet from the Attorney General's office about how those businesses can comply with what's written in the law. But the dialogue that we had up at the Break the Silence event was, I'm feeling a little uneasy about this because most of the businesses in my district, which means most of my constituents that might be victims of domestic violence, will never benefit from this in any way. And so we had a little open dialogue of how many of you had good experiences with an employer when you had to deal with a situation. And there were good experiences, there were bad experiences. And out of that, we brainstormed and said, well, maybe we can find some business owners that have dealt with this in a small business setting and have had a good experience with the victim, and then sort of share that experience with others. And so that's what brought us here today. So I won't talk about the entire law because there's a lot of statutory changes. Strangulation is now a crime, it never was before. The reason for that is it's a level of escalation of violence. We usually find that when the crime gets to the highest level, which might become homicide, strangulation happened just before it, but it wasn't recognized as a crime, it wasn't tracked. And so the district attorneys across the Commonwealth saw that that was an issue so that we could actually track the data, figure out the level of escalation of crime, and make sure that there was appropriate interventions at that level. But the piece around the employees, the statute says that if you're 50 or more employees, you have to allow up to 15 days within a calendar year of leave for employees. But the employees must go and exhaust existing time of vacation time, sick time, personal leave, whatever your benefit package has for those types of compensations. And then if they've exhausted that and still need some time, then it is unpaid leave unless the employer on their own choice decides that they want to create a paid leave situation. So it's up to 15 days unpaid, but the employee will tap into existing leave mechanisms if they so choose. There's a situation, and some of these are complicated cases, if the perpetrator is the employee, which, you know,
If the
they are employees.
employee.
Yeah, if your employee is the perpetrator of the crime, they are not eligible for leave. So they have to go to court and do all of that. They're not covered by this. They don't have a right under the law to take the leave time. It's whatever your business model is around compensation and benefit package. So if they've got to go to court as the perpetrator, they're not covered under this. This covers the leave for the victims. And there was a lot of debate on that when we started, because you can imagine there are advocates for both sides of the aisle, both sides of the issue, and there were some folks that were saying, well, you know, they got to go to court too. Yeah, well, they should have perpetrated a crime. I know they're innocent until proven guilty, but we were really trying to look at how do we not only help the employee be able to go into a recovery mode, the legal piece of it, but also counseling, and to also try to work with the businesses so that the employee can be a productive employee. So by allowing the individual a level of flexibility for the recovery phase, will make that employee a better employee going forward. And I know that it's always difficult when the state mandates some type of leave. And that's why the issue of paid versus unpaid, the statute came out that it is unpaid leave, which is the legal right, but the employer can choose how they want to do that once the employee uses the leave that you've already appropriated in your benefit package. So for those of you that don't have, majority of you don't have 50 or more employees, we just wanted to sort of talk about some situations, and Gabbys in particular, where the victim was supported by employers, and then maybe even have at the end here a dialogue about ways that we think that we can work together going forward and raising awareness and helping individuals get to a point where they're comfortable, A, coming out as a victim, and B, getting the necessary resources to help them bring themselves whole after the incident. So with that, I'd like to introduce Gabbe Rowland, who would like to talk about her situation. And I know that Gabby has stood up not only for herself as an individual, but she has stood up for other victims in the community. And most recently, in the last few weeks, she's had to sort of revisit the situation. So Gabby, we thank you for your strength in being able, I know just a couple of days ago, it all came back, and so I'm very proud of you to be able to have the strength to come here today and continue to educate the public.
First of all, I want to thank the Chamber for inviting me here today. And once again, I'm here to talk about domestic violence and how it affects employers and employees and how employers are able to help. I was once a victim, but I'm now proud to say I'm a strong survivor. For 6 consecutive days, I was abused in the most sick, twisted, and heinous ways possible by a man who claimed to love me. I met him when I was in junior high through mutual friends, and we reconnected in 2010 on Facebook. We started dating in October 2011, and just 4 months into our relationship, he started serving a year sentence in jail for a crime he committed against a previous girlfriend. I stood by faithfully. Meanwhile, he painted a very pretty picture of what our life could be. He promised me only the best, as the sky was the limit for us. We talked to the house on a big lawn with a white picket fence, kids and a dog running around. We had even conceived a child together shortly after he was released from jail, and a few weeks later, I had a miscarriage. I believed we had potential to be that one couple people would look at and wish they were us. That all changed the summer of 2013 when he suddenly felt the need to drag me into his cesspool of a lifestyle. The mental abuse turned to verbal abuse and then rapidly escalated into physical abuse before I even knew it. My relationship felt like a roller coaster. It all started with him accusing me of being unfaithful to him while he was in jail. He didn't believe me that I only had eyes for him. He hit me across my face with the back of his hand on numerous occasions, pulled me back into his car by my hair, and belittled me over and over again. I couldn't wrap my head around what was happening and couldn't imagine things getting worse, but my abuser could. He beat me with a belt across my rear end in the middle of the woods during broad daylight, forcibly injected me with heroin against my will for the majority of the week and even sometimes multiple times a day. Throughout the week, I was told, I'm sick of you and your lies, you're a whore, you're a slut. But he said to me, which I thought would be the last words I hear, is I'm going to bring your body out to Western Mass and no one's going to find it. After being threatened with death, I didn't think things could get worse. But I was then forced to perform inhumane sexual acts on his dog. Afterwards, he raped me. The worst part of it all was he filmed it all to use as blackmail if I told anyone what he made me do. On July 5th, 2013, I broke my silence. I left him to save my life. I left him because I respected myself. The day I broke my silence was the day I knew I deserved better. Telling my parents was not an option for me at this time. I turned to my job for support instead. I had been working at Shirley Acres for a little over a year, and I created a trusting relationship with my immediate boss, Irene. That Friday, my abuser called me numerous times on the work phone throughout the day to remind me that I needed to quit my job. His plan was to move to New Bedford, get clean, and start a new life together. All I could think was who was going to hire two 24-year-olds who live in a hotel and are hooked on heroin. I had tried my best after every phone call to stay calm and not let his demands get the best of me. Besides trying to hide all the mysterious phone calls and act as if nothing was going on, I didn't want anyone to notice or ask why I was constantly running to the bathroom. I had been injected with heroin for the past 5 days, and when I woke up at 11:15 a.m. to be at work for noon, I woke up in a fog, and I was incredibly nauseous. I managed to get to work, but I felt miserable. I was sitting at my desk, shaking uncontrollably, and when I felt so sick, I ran to the bathroom only to dry heat. My body was craving the drugs. I was becoming addicted. He had been calling all day. His last phone call was at 3:30, right as Irene was getting ready to leave for the day. I quickly agreed to everything he was dictating because I knew my opportunity to get help was about to walk out the door, and I would be stuck. I hung up and turned to her, about to cry. I told her he wants me to quit my job and move to New Bedford tonight. She asked me if I could make it through the weekend, offering to allow me to keep some of my belongings at the hotel, safe away from him until I could break free completely. At that point, tears were streaming down my face, and I told her, I don't think I'll make it through this weekend. She simply responded with, is that bad? And I told her it was, and I needed to get away from him. I needed to be in a safe place like a shelter. I knew going home or to a friend's house wouldn't be sufficient. I'd cave and go back to him. And once I was back in his power, my life would be over. I didn't want anyone to know the hell I was living. My relationship had grown into something I never thought could be possible, and more importantly, something I never thought I'd be part of. I was ashamed, but somehow in the few hours that day at work, I knew my life would be coming to an end if I didn't get out immediately. Domestic violence is all about power and control. The abuser thrives on having it all, and as a result, the victim becomes dependent on their abuser. My abuser had been working very hard since the beginning to cut me off from family and friends. And I hate to admit it, but he was successful. He wanted my world to revolve around him and him alone. My job was the very last thing of my own. It became an escape from him and the downward spiral of a lifestyle I was dragged into. Between Irene and the owner, Ketterer, they decided it would be best for me to go to the police station. They believed I needed a safe place to drop off his car since I had used it to get to work that day. And at the same time, get into a domestic violence shelter for my safety. Greg had arranged for another employee to come in early so I could leave work. I did go straight to the police station and get the help I needed. I had felt hopeless, destroyed, unlovable, and tainted, but I have remained resilient every day. I'm a good person with a heart of gold, and I know now I'm not to blame for these horrific acts of pure evil. With the assistance of Irene and Greg, I was able to break free from my abuser, and I am now 635 days free of abuse. I have connected with survivors around the country through an organization by the name of Break the Silence Against Domestic Violence. I have found women who understand me on a deeper level, women who have walked in my shoes, felt my pain, and came out alive. I gain strength, courage, and wisdom from each and every one of them every day. I am now a volunteer outreach advocate for BTS, an advocate for social change. I feel it is my duty to help others who are still suffering and to help them see there is a better life after leaving an abusive relationship. One of our missions is to educate communities on the dangers of domestic violence, and that's part of the reason why we're here today. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men will experience domestic violence in their lifetime. That's an astonishing number, and to me, that's way too many. About a year ago, the founder and executive director of BTS, Kristen Kurgadon, came to Falmouth to interview me as one of 10 survivors being featured in the BTS national tour, Return of Social Change. It was then at an open forum, both Representative David Vieira and I learned that many survivors had difficulty with their employers when it came to issues related or connected to domestic violence. Many felt that they were being punished for having to take time off for crucial things such as court dates or therapy appointments. We both agreed that survivors have suffered greatly at the hands and minds of their abusers and need more assistance in their life. I am thrilled to have 2 local business owners here with me today, along with David Vieira. All 3 men stand strong against domestic violence with me and want to help change the community we live in, and I appreciate their help. Business owners Ketterer and Michael Lewis want to help educate others on how to better help victims in their time of need. Thank you.
Well, first of all, let me just say that what Irene and I did, or I should say what Gabby is giving us credit for doing, doesn't hold a candle to what she has gone through, and the life she had to live. And that takes an incredible amount of courage, certainly more courage than we had, and probably more courage than most people in your situation would ever have. And I'm just proud to say that we had her on our staff. I mean, and some of the things I just want to point out with us and Gabby is we hired Gabby in March of 2012, and it was at this time he was incarcerated. So that 9 months, or roughly 9 months, from March till December or January when he was freed, we got to know the real Gabby. And had we not had that 9 precious months with you, knowing who you really were, knowing the person that she was, you know, I don't know what would have happened, what would have transpired. But we had that great opportunity to get to know her. She is an excellent woman, I'm sure. But speaking from our relationship, when she worked for us, she was a fabulous employee. She punctual, dedicated, reliable, friendly, professional, everything. You couldn't ask. And then being in the hospitality business, as I'm sure Michael will understand, you know, when you're servicing people, you look for those traits. Whether a person can quickly they can learn a computer or your property management system or cash registers or answer a phone, that stuff is immaterial. If they carry the intangibles, that's what you're looking for in the hospitality industry, and Gabby had all those stuff. So it was a no-brainer for us to hire Gabby, and she quickly demonstrated that she was a tremendous asset to our property. So that 9 or 10 months that we had an opportunity where we saw her potential, she did just about it. She worked in any department we needed her to. She was cleaning rooms. She was working in the dining room along with being hired at the front office and taking reservations. Shortly after he was released, and by the way, we knew the antenna went up shortly after we hired Gabby because it became known to us that her boyfriend, who was incarcerated, who he was, and the reputation that he carried here in town. So immediately the antenna, I will admit, as an employer, went up. And you start thinking things like, what happens when he gets out? Is he going to learn his lesson? Will he ever learn his lesson? And all the things that go along with that. So, but we basically put those things on the back burner and continued to go along and just prayed and hoped that everything would work out for Gabby. Well, shortly after he got out, things seemed to be fine there for a while. And then little by little, we saw things. We saw traits. We saw things happening at the workplace with Gabby that didn't things that were not characteristic of her. And because we had that 9 or 10 months of seeing the real Gabby, we began to realize that maybe things aren't quite what they should be. And I give Irene a lot of credit as Gabby, because they work fairly close together, meaning they're located close to her desks are side by side for all intents and purposes. So, happen to talk about personal things. Two women get together. No offense, please don't take any offense to that. But you do. When you're that close confines, you start talking about things. And I think little by little, Gabby was very guarded in her feelings, and she obviously was torn between, trying to make her relationship work with this guy and not letting any information out. And at the same time, she was probably torn with, is this really going to work out? What's going to happen? Is this guy really who he says he is, and so on. So during this whole period, which was probably January to June, we started seeing signs. Her work started being deteriorating a little bit. Her error in judgment, as I mentioned before. Coming in late. I remember a phone call distinctly at about 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. I'm sorry I can't make it to work today. We got thrown out of the apartment. Totally uncharacteristic. It's not the Gabby that I know. And okay, fine. So you start making adjustments in the schedule. Again, things begin to continue to deteriorate. And Gabby, as time went on, phone calls, then she'd shut off her phone, or she wouldn't answer her phone, then the texts would start coming through and she wouldn't answer the texts, and then all of a sudden the phone started ringing at Shoreway, and she had to answer the phone at Shoreway, and he'd be calling her and harassing her and everything else, so things became quite obvious to us. So much so that we needed to have a couple discussions, things are, we're not seeing Gabby, we're seeing mistakes being made. This isn't, you're calling in sick, this is happening, that's happening, and so on, and letting her know that, we can't continue this, so we, have to get a handle on this. And okay, fine, and she'd fine, things would be fine for a few days, but again, things would continue to occur. Moving forward, and I'm going to guess it was around June or whatever, she came in with what appeared to be a bruised eye, a black eye, and she tried to hide it. Came up with a very plausible excuse to Irene as to what may have happened, and it became a reality to us that things weren't really going the way, that they should be going at home, and the domestic disputes and the domestic issues were really starting to take hold. Shortly thereafter, Gabby came to us and said she thinks she's going to leave him. She did attempt to try to leave him, and she also would call me up to let me know that he threatened to destroy some property at Shoreway Acres. So we made an order of no trespass against him and suggested that she may consider a restraining order, which she did I believe you did get. And she held true to herself. She held back for a while. But then I remember getting a phone call while I was away from Irene telling me that I got bad news. Gabby has decided to go back to him. And it was very disappointing to hear that, because we basically let Gabby know that we're going to hang in there with you. You got to do these things to better your life, to get yourself out from under this terrible threat. And she went back. I was very discouraged, because I knew the end result meant that we were going to probably have to let her go, because we just couldn't continue the constant tardiness, calling in sick, changing of schedules and everything else, not to mention the harassment. And of course, she's threatened. Her life is threatened. And she lets Irene know. Irene lets me know. And we encourage her to go to the police station. And of course, you know the rest of the story of what happened and so on. And to seek help, get into a safe place. We gave her, she took about 2 weeks off. She needed about 2 weeks to kind of get her, but she did come back to work after after about 2 weeks, putting in a few hours here, a few hours there. I just want to say that it took incredible strength for her to go through what she did. Had we not, as an employer, had we not had that remarkable opportunity to know who she really was in that first 9 or 10 months, I don't know. As an employer, I'll be honest, I don't know whether we would have kept her on. Us in the business, we in the business know that employees can be tremendous assets, as Gabby was, or they can be liabilities. And when they're liabilities, unfortunately, they don't usually make it, and they jump from job to job to job to job. Gabby carrying all the traits that we learned about her in that first 9 or 10 months, without a doubt, was an asset. Is an asset, I'm sure, where she's working now. And because of that, we held on. We were willing to hold on. Because she was incredibly important. We knew that. We know what she was going through. Deep inside of us, we knew what she was going through, even though she was not willing to discuss it or talk about it. Would we have been willing to go the extra mile with Gabby had we hired her after we got out of jail and all this started happening? I don't know. Maybe not. Would we have kept her on if we hired her after we had gotten to jail? Her life went into this tailspin. I'll be honest, maybe not. Probably not. I don't mind saying that we had once hired an employee, not anywhere near the situation that Gabby was confronted with, but we hired an employee who was in a domestic situation. We didn't know at the time. We only found out after the fact, but we hired her in the liability phase. She's great potential, but we couldn't keep her on. So therein lies the difference. Would we do things again like that? I don't know. It's hard to explain. There's no real good advice that we can give anybody, but just when you're, today, we as employers are no different. I mean, we're like teachers, coaches, doctors, pastors, police officers. We have a new role. We have a responsibility to the people that we hire. We have a responsibility because we have to kind of look out to people, just as doctors do, just as pastors and coaches and people like that. It's a new role. And, we have to be very vigilant because sometimes, in Gabby's case, when they're very silent. They're crying out, but their cries are silent. It's characteristic, it's the things that change about them that we have to be vigilant about and pay attention to. And that's what we were doing. And again, I don't need to take credit because it really, I have to say, was not me. It was vigilant and it was watchful and saw the changes that were taking place within Gabby. So I'm just saying that we have to be vigilant as employers. And I just thank God that we were able to help and support Gabby through all this. And I can only pray that I don't have to go through this again as an employer. I mean, I say that and I mean it. But because I don't know what we would do. Honestly, I don't know. There is that very fine line. But again, through the courage of Gabby, because we got to really know Gabbe Rowland, and just what kind of an incredible person she is. It was at the time when we hired her. She continued to. So that when all these changes took place, we were ready to step up to the plate a bit and be willing to help her. She took whatever time she needed when she came back after a couple weeks being away. She took whatever time she needed. She needed time to go to therapy and to do the things that she needed to do to get her life back together. And I'm proud to say that we were willing to do whatever we could do to give her the time that she needed. If she felt that she could only go back to work 10 hours a week, we made those arrangements. And we did that because we saw how much of an asset she was for us, and we are glad to know that in some way we were an asset to her too. So, thank you very much. And
Thanks, Greg.
it's a pleasure to be here.
I think I got invited along. I don't know why I got invited along. I have been in recovery for a lot of years, and I'm open about it mainly because it comes with a little bit of embarrassment at some points, but it's helped more people than it's embarrassed me over the course of the multiple years of being in recovery. And I got speaking with Gabby a while back, and I realized in talking to her at my restaurant one day that the situations I deal with are similar in the case as an employer that she dealt with Greg and Irene about that it's both sensitive and it's life-threatening. And I was on a board at the local treatment center for a while, and being in recovery, and I'm very active around the community in recovery, and I'm happy to say that. But in return, I've hired a lot of people from local houses, Emerson House, Miller House, to come work for me, get a little second chance boost back into the community from a troubled past, because I've had that troubled past. And as an employer aspect, and that's what got this whole thing started with her and I, you know, my employees are the first thing you see coming into my place. I have a successful business. I have a lot of young people that work for me. And I try to run my business as an open, I want to be, it's an us thing. It's not me against them. And I'm completely in the trenches all day long with the gang that I have that work for me. And when Greg touched base on, you know, had he not known Gabby for the 9 months, that got a little goosebump to me, because that's what I do. Maybe I get too involved, you know, but I try to be part of that thing, and that's why I want my staff to be comfortable coming to me and problems and whatnot along the way. And I've had from physical abuse, young kids coming to me from physical abuse, sexual abuse, drug abuse, and had I not had the experience I have over in this department, I don't know how I would have handled it. And it's all the same sort of thing as an employer, as maybe not the hell that Gabby went through, but it's a hell nevertheless. And I've, you know, from counseling appointments to making sure they get to enough meetings, making sure if there's court dates. These are people too trying to get out of a hell that they've been living in for who knows how long. And mainly for me, it's a lot of young people. And I go, and it's not this, but I go the extra mile to make sure that they have the avenues to be able to get to that, to get to that, to get to that, and I'll work around their schedules. Because without it, who knows, you know, especially what's going on now with all the epidemic with the heroin around here and people dying left and right, and I don't need to get into that because it's a topic for a whole other situation. But I just, you know, I open myself up, and I've had in more than a handful of, you know, I've been over there for 26 years, and I've had in more than a handful of times had teenagers come to me that I'm the only one they're comfortable enough to tell this to. You know, they still live with mom and dad, or just mom, or just dad, or the grandmother, and I'm the one they're comfortable with because I've opened myself up to them and got on the same level with them, and I'm grateful that I do that. You know, from kids that have been abused by family members, from kids that are pregnant and don't have any idea how the hell they're going to tell the mother and father, what the hell should they do, to my boy, you know, the whole thing with the heroin, my boyfriend's trying to get, you know, what do I do? I know that you're in recovery and I'm comfortable enough to talk to you about it. And it's been, I've hired multiple people that are just coming back into the mainstream to try to better their lives, and it's similar to the situation as an employer, not as that, but as an employer on how you deal with it, because it's sensitive. You don't know, you're trying to, I'm still trying to run a business. I'm trying to get a product out. I'm trying to have a happy face getting that product out, and I want a consistent, good product. That's why I do business. And I want to make a profit at the end of it. But you need this group of people to do that. And for us, you know, even my son manages it with me, and sometimes he just shakes his head at the way I go about things. But the end result is he's always comes up to me and he gets it. Now that he's 28 years old, he gets it. And I think that I would not have I wouldn't change one thing about the way that I've started or the way I have my philosophy, because the flip side of this whole equation is I have no turnover. I have very, very limited amount of turnover. If I hire a young kid, 14 years old, to clean tables, 85% of the time I have until the day they graduate college. And it's consistent, because through high school, they got soccer practice, they got this. I'm constantly, we'll work it out, and it can be a pain in the ass. But yeah, the reward is they're coming in happy. If I'm in a bind, I call them. Yep, absolutely. It works both ways. And over the course of the time, I've done a lot of scheduled stuff. I've gone to court with people. I've gone to drug and alcohol counseling with employees. And I don't say that to think I'm this. I say that because I absolutely believe that if I'm here, I'm going to get a better productive staff. And I'm going to get a better productive thing. And I feel better as a human being, and I feel better as being a part of the community. So I think that it's important for business owners to open them, just be a little open and open yourself up to make it okay for somebody to come talk to you. For me, I don't want to be here and somebody over here that's scared to deal with it, just not, or being in a predicament where they can't feel safe to talk about what's going on, or safe to feel that they got to do this, or safe that their uncle is abusing them, or their boyfriend's abusing them, and it's a philosophy for me that has been sometimes stressful. It like breaks, you don't know how we're going to handle it, one thing to the next. But the rewards at the end, and the fact that I have the most loyal staff around that I know, I wouldn't change much of it for nothing. So I'm glad I would be here. Thank you.
Why don't we open up for dialogue, questions, comments?
Hi, good morning. Thank you all for your great talks about what you've experienced. I'm Deb, and I'm from Independence House. And what the three of you just did, take me 5 hours to explain to people why abuse happens, what can we do, and when you spoke about, again, if you don't mind, when you were at the hotel, what the abuser was doing was trying to isolate you and pull you away from all your supports. And so then when people say, well, why don't people leave? Well, if you've been beat down, told how terrible you are, have no support, you're isolated, you're in someone's total control, that's why people don't leave. So thank you for, you did great examples, and you showed, and you also showed the support that you could give people who are in recovery. Just as someone's a victim of violence, they need that same support too. So what we can do at Independence House, we can provide free counseling to victims, secondary victims, which are family members, and we can also come out and share with local businesses if you'd like us to come talk to your staff, have some more education. What are the warning signs? There were some clear ones, like the person doesn't seem to be the way they normally are, why? And so we're here to educate. We do a lot of work with prevention, and we're also here to support the victims. And in this law, one of the things we can also help with is supporting or giving you the documentation you may need to ensure that, yes, the person did receive counseling. So we're here if you need any support. Just our office is directly across the road on Main Street, and we have offices in Hyannis, Orleans, and Provincetown. So anything we can do, please feel free to call us.
You had kind of mentioned about how if Gabby hadn't, ultimately, if you hadn't come forward, you were in this situation where it was sensitive. This may be different with adults and minors, when you have dealing with minors. But first of all, Gabby, how would you have felt if, without your permission, your employer had gone to the police and said, I think there's a domestic violence situation going on here? And then the more broad question is, what are the responsibilities of doing that if you suspect domestic violence, and what are your legal liabilities if you don't?
Well, I guess answering your first part of the question, I think at the point where I was, like if I hadn't said to Irene that I wanted to leave, that I knew that things were progressing rapidly, I would have been okay with it at that point, because I was already starting to think of that myself, of getting away. For me, the police wasn't an option, only because my abuser had continuously drilled into my head for 21 months that the police do not help, they only hurt, due to his past. If it was at any other point, well, I guess I'd be okay with it, because in May, when he had threatened the physical property, I had simply just called Greg and told him, you know, my exes or my boyfriend is saying this, and he's gonna throw boulders through the window or whatever he said. And Greg said, well, we're gonna call the police. And I wasn't mad, I wasn't upset, because at that point I knew that it was escalating to physical damage, whether it be property or a human or anything. So I don't think I would have been upset. And pretty much throughout the whole relationship, when things were bad, I knew it was bad.
Right, did you ever consider that?
What's that?
Did you ever consider that?
Well, well, first of all, the part she was just talking about when he threatened the property, the damage of the property, we knew that the situation with him was, and he'd also, he'd do drive-throughs. He would do drive-throughs of the property, maybe to see if she was working or whatever the case might be. And yeah, it became apparent to us at that point that this situation was going downhill pretty quickly. And on June 7th, I think it was, is when we took the no trespass, put a no trespass order against him. And then shortly thereafter, right away there, she put up the restraining order. We knew at that point that things had to change for her, or we were probably going to have to go to the police. I mean, I did call the police, I explained the situation. I mean, as soon as I mentioned his name, it was like, oh, okay, fine, yeah, all right, well, so come on down, we'll fill out a no trespass and everything else. But yeah, it was going to get to that point. But things from that point went down rapidly. And it wasn't too long after that when she was reaching out for help, because she knew at that point her life was threatened.
I'm not an attorney, but I don't think there's any legal mandatory reporting unless you're in a particular juvenile service provision, or in the case of senior citizens, there are mandatory report laws. But as an employer, I'm not.
So even though you have minors, if you suspect they're being abused, you're not required.
I don't know if you, it's with the minors, I think your liability's probably I'm not sure either, but I would imagine your liability's probably the other way.
Yeah, so the mandatory report laws are around if you're a law
Right,
enforcement
yeah.
official, if you're providing service. So,
School teacher.
yeah, school teachers,
Right,
coaches, camp counselors. So mandatory reporting is an area where you're providing service to juveniles or senior citizens. There's also elder mandatory report laws. But as an employer, there isn't a mandatory report.
How about if you're running a facility that kids come to a lot?
Yes.
I mean, I'm with Falmouth, we're going to run a facility, you've got programs for kids, but not necessarily.
Yeah,
So if you're providing service to the kids and you suspect something.
Yeah, so when you do that, you're going to have your employees or volunteers have to be Corey checked.
Right, exactly.
They become mandatory reporters, and you need usually some kind of license or permit based on the program that you're doing.
Yep.
And so the Department of Public Health has a series of regulations that would detail the requirements around that as well.
How about liability if you go outside those requirements and you go to the police saying you suspect domestic violence?
You can always err on the side of caution. It's if you don't report and you're required to report the liability.
I think it's more of an ethical thing. I mean,
Right. I mean, I had a situation like that 35 years ago. I had someone working for me and I suspected domestic violence.
anybody can call DCF and report something.
Just do it.
They may not open a case on that one, but, yeah, anybody can call.
My name is Alan Wilson. I'm from Falmouth Rotary. And I just want to say I'm here primarily because the Rotary has been actively involved in the community since 1927. And we're interested in helping the community in ways that the community needs to be helped. And domestic violence is one of these things that is raised to the top of the list of things that we want to address. And let me just say congratulations to Gabby, and it's just very, very heartening and positive to see that the two business owners in Falmouth that have gone to extreme steps to help people that are going through these horrific type of situations. The thing that we'd like to kind of chat with you and maybe come to the Falmouth Rotary meeting and do a presentation there if you feel comfortable doing that, because I think it's very critical that the world know, particularly in Falmouth, what steps need to be taken and what the situation is, because there's a lot of conversation. But I guess the thing that I would like to get a read on is after the breakup and you call the police and you are in this better place, was there any issue with the individual that was perpetrating the crime? Was there any kind of legal action that was taken against this person? Was there any corrective behavior done? What happened in that whole piece?
Well, I went to the police station that day. I did not want to press charges. I just wanted to get away. I wanted to be away from him and in a safe environment. Like I mentioned, I wanted to get into a shelter. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get into one. There weren't any beds available. And I went to a friend's house, and probably at 11 o'clock at night, I wasn't friends with my mom on Facebook, so I sent her a Facebook request and told her, I'm going to call you from my friend's phone, I need to talk to you. And I talked to my mom and dad on the phone for a few hours and told them everything that happened. And the following day, I was going to a friend's cookout, and something had just hit me that what he did to me was not right. And if I don't say anything, someone else is going to have to live the life that I just left. So I went to the police station, I went to Falmouth Police Station, and I spent 3 hours telling a female officer what had happened to me, showing her track marks on my arms, bruises on my rear end, and I pressed charges. I was granted an emergency restraining order that would last, I think it lasts for a week, roughly. The following day, I went back into the police station. The clerk magistrate in Falmouth had thought that my case would go to Superior Court, and he wanted a recorded statement of me. So I went in on Sunday and did that. Monday, I went to Falmouth District Court, and he was arraigned for 11 charges against me, and I was granted a 1-year restraining order. In October of 2013, I testified against him for the first time. He was on probation after he was released from jail, so naturally these new charges that he was arraigned on we're going to hold him for another year, so I testified to that. Prior to that, he was also held under the Dangerousness Act, which holds an abuser or perpetrator for 90 days without bail. So that was about a week after my restraining order when he was arraigned, and then I testified in October. He was given that 1-year probation to serve, and I went to a 3-day jury trial in about a year ago, March of 2014, and he was given 6 years to serve. He had accumulated some other charges after me while he was in jail, and he recently pleaded out to those charges in Superior Court and is serving 5 to 6.5 years in Walpole right now. And he just last week, a week ago today, he filed a motion for a new trial regarding me, and the judge had denied his request.
Okay.
So that's kind of where we stand.
That showed a lot of courage there. I was assuming there was, hopefully that there'd be something that would happen that would correct it or not allow it to continue.
Well, for the time being, with him being behind bars, it allows him not to have contact with me. But
Okay. That's great. Thank you very much for sharing that.
you're welcome.
I'm Diane Pratt. I'm the Executive Director of the Cape Cod Center for Women, and I've worked very closely with Gabby. And we are the emergency domestic violence shelter on Cape Cod and the islands for women and children. Gabby tried to get into our shelter while she was going through this abuse, and we were full, as we always are, because right now our house can only house 4 families at a time. So our goal is to get a larger home here in Barnstable County. We've identified a 10-bedroom house, and what we'd like to do is to have 4 rooms that are totally reserved for Cape and Islands residents at all times, so that when instances happen like that happened with Gabby, they'd have somewhere to come. Last week, I don't know if you probably all have seen the article in the paper about the woman in Orleans. She was actually on the phone with one of my advocates when her abuser broke into her friend's house wielding an axe. And she was able to get out the back door, and he attacked her friend. He had held her captive, his girlfriend captive for the weekend. We were trying to get her into our shelter. We were doing an intake when this happened, and it was my advocate that called the police. So it happens everywhere, it happens every day, and in order to give the victims the support that they need to get into a program like Deb does at Independence House, and they need to get into a secure shelter so that the advocates can work with them and give them all of the tools that they need so that they won't go back. It's usually 7 times before a woman will leave her abuser.
What's the average length of stay?
We're not, we are an emergency shelter, but we are funded through DCF so that the people stay with us until they're basically ready to go out on their own. We take a holistic approach, or if there becomes a safety concern and we have to transfer them out. Recently, we've had several families that we've been able to place into transitional housing and permanent housing, so we've had more of a turnover lately. Our programs are working, but it can be anywhere between 3 to 9 months usually. And then we always have children, and we get the kids in school and they get involved in activities, so, and trying to place them on housing in Cape Cod is difficult.
Do you accept only women?
No, we would take anyone that was, being abused. We are aligned with SafeLink. It's for all of the domestic violence shelters in Massachusetts. And the minute any of the shelters have an opening, everyone in the state knows. And we had an opening last week, and we had 12 calls in 15 minutes.
Oh, do you know if the study has been completed? That study? Because there's a shortage throughout the state, and we're moving folks, and I like you're talking about the new site might have some dedicated beds for our region, but it's because there's some regulations around the network that you have to take folks on a priority listing. And so in the budget last year, we were doing basically market analysis to see what the true demand is, and I'm not sure if that's been completed.
Yeah, I think it was done last year.
Was it
It was
completed?
last year. Yeah, it was before you came down here. It was when Miss Martin, that whole victim murder with in Waltham or whatever. It was shortly after that. What was asked of us is, what do you need?
Okay.
And I think Jane Doe had something to do with that, and they compiled it and they met with Mr. DeLeo. Yeah, and it was an enormous number of how many beds and services and all that stuff.
I'm glad we're having that conversation because we're right now in the state budget process. In the next couple of weeks, the House version will come out, so I want to see the results of the study and see what it is.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's what you were asking, but I remember we
Yeah.
had meetings and, it was unbelievable, but I was surprised at the numbers.
It's something like 250 women every week in Massachusetts
That week, yeah.
are looking for domestic
Yeah, because when we get emergencies, we don't have a place to go, there's just, where do we go?
Sometimes we can put them up in a hotel, but that's not ideal.
Right, 'cause that's not safety, and to do that.
everyone for participating. Look forward to maybe having the connection with the Rotary Club and see follow what you all might be able to do there. And for the advocates and service providers, thank you for the work you do every day. It's work that we don't talk a lot about, but it affects 25% of families in our community in one way or another. So, and so it's out there, and the more we bring awareness to it, hopefully the more we can shed the light, break the silence, and stop the cycle. So look forward to continuing our conversation around the state budget for the beds and figuring out what the result of the study was, because I know we mandated the study so that we could figure out what resources, with the scarce resources we have, can we dedicate some more resources in that area and just get our arms around how big the issue was. So.
Thank you. Thank you, Gabby.
I just want to say thank you for coming. I'm a small business lender, so this is all new for me. I'm being very well educated here on the subject. I just want to tell you that we're a small business lender. We work with the Small Business Administration, and also we get other funds from Treasury Department, USDA, to get them out to small businesses to support them through capital. But we also support small businesses through education. So we go around to the chambers and we sponsor workshops so that the word can get out. So I just want you to know, there's a survey here that is about today's workshop. If you could fill it out, it would be very important to us because we're always looking for new subjects, new subject matter, so that we can get it out to small businesses to help them. And this card here is all the workshops we put on this year that we sponsored with other chambers all around Cape Cod. So you're welcome to go to any of them. We put these out every year. If you have any, if you have any questions or anything about workshops, you can always call me or email me. My business card is here. But we're also a resource. We like to be called a resource because we like to get information out to small businesses that can help them. So I'd like to thank you all for coming. And there's coffee and bagels if you want them on the way out.